Well, hello everyone. There is really no point for this film other than I'm doing a test. So if you're looking for something poetic or magnetic or sympathetic, this probably is not it. Sitting here in my house today, it's been a very strange day. There was a helicopter over my house for probably 2 hours this morning, and it had one of those giant like circular lenses on the bottom. So clearly they were looking for something. My guess is that sweet, stinky weed. Unfortunately for them, there is none here, so I'm not really sure what they were looking for, but that's how the day started. Quickly transitioned over to someone tree trimming around the house, which kind of makes it difficult to make films. And then right as I got into recording, and after I had asked my wife, like, hey, make sure you don't come in here, I'm gonna record. Guess what she did? Yeah, she came flying in on her cell phone, came right past me, right here. Just right through like I didn't exist. So that's kind of the day. The reason I'm making this film is I am recording this on an iPhone 13 Pro. And in typical MILNOR technology fashion, I've made some pretty good blunders over the past week that I thought you might get a kick out of. Now, the iPhone 13 Pro is what I'm using. I had an iPhone 12, a regular 12, a lame-o for the common folk 12, and I upgraded to the 13 for a couple of reasons. Number one, cinematic mode, which I'm using right now, which is kind of a weird digital fall off mode. I don't know if I like it or not, but I'm testing it. And it also, the iPhone 13 Pro is capable of shooting ProRes. And ProRes is interesting to me. Now, when I say ProRes, I mean 1080 ProRes, because I don't have a computer that will handle 4K, so there's no real reason for me to shoot 4K at the moment. If I do get a computer at some point that will handle 4K, there are some things in the field that I will be using. I will be shooting in 4K because it's things that I may not see again, and I want to make sure that I have the highest quality possible. And having the ability to shoot ProRes 4K on the phone is pretty interesting to me. It takes up a behemoth amount of space on the phone. But the reason I'm testing the phone and making this film right now is that the phone was never really a tool that I enjoyed using. I certainly still don't really enjoy the phone as a still photographic tool because I prefer a camera that I can look through, probably because I've been doing that my whole adult life. It's just natural. It feels more to me like I'm officially making photographs when I'm looking through a camera. I know for other people that has no relevance whatsoever, and I totally get that. But for motion content, this last road trip taught me a lot about the iPhone. And what I realized was for a lot of the films that I have to make, or the films that I have time to make, the phone is actually a really good tool. And the fact that I can shoot ProRes 1080 on this 13 in cinematic mode, or if I have an option of one of those two things, it's interesting, it's appealing. So I looked at some of the footage I'd done on the last road trip and was like, you know what, this is actually really usable. This thing is tiny, I've got it with me all the time. That's the good part of this story. The bad part of this story is in my infinite wisdom, by the way, and this might look like indigo blue tea. It is tea and it is indigo blue. That is butterfly pea flower tea. By the way, you're gonna use this phone, you better have a power brick handy, because man, does it eat the battery. It eats the battery like a Sizzler buffet after the NFL Sunday afternoon game. That is not a pretty sight. If you've ever been to Sizzler after the Sunday afternoon game, you're gonna see debauchery at a level that would make a billy goat puke. So have a battery pack. What I did was, the stabilization in the iPhone is really good. It's way better than the stabilization in my Fuji or my Sony. For the life of me, even bodies with IBIS, I cannot handhold them. So I'm going out of my mind trying to handhold these cameras and looking at the footage and going, this isn't even remotely close to being stable enough. The Sony I can run through their software, which works, but it's an extra step. It also does a little crop into the image. Not the end of the world, but whatever. I'm jaded. I'm looking for path of least resistance. So I keep looking at the phone footage and I'm like, this is pretty good, but it could be better. So what do I do in my infinite wisdom? I go on YouTube and I start looking at reviews of the DJI OM5 iPhone gimbal. I guess it will work with other phones, but for the sake of this film, I will call it an iPhone gimbal. It didn't work for me at all. And now, before I say anything more, I love DJI. I just filled out a survey for them and I just wrote them an email. I love DJI products for the most part. I love their packaging. I think their packaging is fantastic. I think their website's fantastic. Their shipping options and how they handle the shipping and the orders is great. I've never had a problem with them. I like everything about them, and the DJI drone I have is the perfect example of how good their product lineup is. And I have like the lowest common denominator, the lowest rung drone. It's awesome. I don't really use it much anymore, but that's a whole nother story. I buy this gimbal, I slap my phone on it, and almost immediately it feels like something's not quite right. Now, for those of you who know me and know the toxicity that my body puts out towards electronics, then you will understand what's happening here. But I get this thing and I'm holding the gimbal straight and the phone is perpendicular to me, and it would just meander off to the right, meander off to the left on its own, as if to say, you know, MILNOR, actually what you're filming sucks. And the gimbal itself must have AI, and it's overriding my vision and saying, it's actually way better over there. If you just aimed your phone over there, you idiot, you would get what you wanted. So to keep the phone straight, I'm doing like some sort of interpretive dance to keep the gimbal in a straight line. And I'm thinking to myself, it shouldn't be this hard. I should just hold it and it's supposed to stay there. But no, I'm doing this stuff trying to keep it straight. That's problem number one. Problem number two is the tilt axis on the phone, on the gimbal, is incredibly limited in this direction. So really, it literally tilts about like this. So there's not a whole lot of range of motion, and the OM5 has an extension arm built into it. So unlike the OM4, which is locked in one position, the OM5 extends. And at the top of it is a joint that you can bend the phone back to fit 90 degree angle. So you can compensate for that lack of tilt, but every time you do that, you have to grab the thing and bend it, which means you can't use that footage. And I was like, that's not working for me. The third point was, on the left-hand side, there's a little plus minus button. And that is the zoom feature when you're using the DJI app. And the app is actually pretty cool. It's got some great tracking features built in. It also has a bunch of like completely crazy automated stuff that I would never in my wildest dreams ever use. Like a weird selfie program that slims my structure of my head and smooths out my skin. I think that's totally alarming. I don't know why anyone would ever put that on any device. It's the most unhealthy thing I've ever seen. But so the tilt doesn't really work that well. The gimbal itself was kind of like had a mind of its own. And the plus minus for the zoom through the DJI app, it wasn't smooth. So you'd get halfway through a zoom and it would hitch and hitch, which made the footage unusable. And I'm like, this could possibly be my death ray. This might have nothing to do with DJI or how that drone operates or the gimbal operates, or maybe I got a bad one. I don't know, but I was like, this isn't usable. The other thing about it that was kind of strange to me, and this is what's leading me to where this film is eventually going to end, hopefully this film will go into the wild and die somewhere, is the motor. I'm using an iPhone 13 Pro, not the Pro Max. And I saw a review where a guy's like, hey, this gimbal works perfectly with the Pro Max, even with a little lens attachment on it. But for me, it felt like the motors in that OM5 with the 13 Pro were sort of at the high level, the limits of what those motors were. Because when I had to plug in my mic, which is a little Rode Wireless Go 2, a little mic that plugs into the lightning port on the phone would sag a little bit, and then I would get this error message saying you need to recalibrate. So I would recalibrate it, but then every time I had to pull the lightning connector out to check the audio, I had to redo it. So I kept getting these error messages. And speaking of that, the clip, now the DJI system is pretty amazing in the sense that it has this magnetic clip that fits on your phone. And so all you do is you take your phone, you get it close to the gimbal and it goes snap and it pops in. In theory, that's amazing. The problem is I use a quad lock case on my phone, and I use that quad lock case on my motorcycle, my bicycle, my van every day. So I cannot be taking my case on and off every time I'm using the gimbal. It's just maddening to have to do that. Well, the quad lock case has a little rise on the back, which meant that the clip from DJI didn't fit properly. And I kept getting error messages saying your phone's not centered, your phone's not centered. And then to make matters worse, when you put the clip on to fit in the correct area, it overlaps with the power button just a little bit. So it's tilted a little bit, which also gave me an error message. Now I'm thinking to myself, DJI, I love your stuff. I love your packaging alone. When you open a package from DJI, it looks fantastic. And so I'm like, how did all these people do reviews on this product and never mention any of this stuff? It's kind of boggling my mind to me a bit, as like, who out there has had any of these experiences besides me? And so I just looked at it and said, you know what, this isn't right for me. If I was someone who was only using the iPhone and I never used a case and I didn't mind that the clip for DJI that goes on the phone is curved and the iPhone is flat. So the clip never feels like it's quite right in the right position. It always feels a little bit up or a little bit down. And you're kind of like, it's sort of on there, it's across the back fine. Doesn't seem to fit perfectly. So I'm like, why am I the only one out here having this problem? It doesn't matter. I've just decided, you know what, I'm sending this back. I have no idea what their return policy is, by the way. If I can't send it back, I'm just gonna give it away. I'll donate it to someone. And if not, I'll send it back and I'll put the money towards something else, God knows what. But in the meantime, I'm thinking to myself, Milner, you're a smart guy. You went to public school, you know? I mean, you've been places. You've been to Omaha. You know what's happening. Why not get a gimbal that works with all of your cameras? Maybe that's a good idea. So I started looking around and I saw this thing, Ziyu, it's a Chinese name. I'm just gonna throw it out there and it's probably wrong, but I'm sticking with it. Ziyu something, Crane M3. White, like my power brick. And remember, it has to match. Don't be a schnook. It's not how you feel, it's how you look. White, small, and badass. It has like the motors in it. Motors that have extra gears and an overdrive that you're never gonna use. It'll use a Sony a7 IV, a7 III with a long lens on it, boom, and it's still small. I can put my a7C on it. I can put my X-T4 on it. I can put my iPhone on it. I can put my GoPro, my ZV-1. Every camera in my arsenal will fit on this gimbal, and it's still only about this big. So it's also 3 times the price, but I don't care as long as it works and I can not have to worry about like, man, is this motor not quite there? And then every time I'm moving the mic, it's like falling off. So that's what I'm looking at. I've not bought it yet. I don't know. Maybe I'll like give myself a couple of days and hold my breath and then I won't end up buying it. I don't know. But that's what I'm working on. So far, this looks kind of interesting with this weird sort of digital, what happens when I give it a foreground? This digital cinematic mode. I don't know. I kind of like it. It's okay. Testing the phone. iPhone 13 is going to be a big part of what I'm doing. I'm going to start making some new style films, hopefully. Although, man, my schedule is a wreck. There is just calls and meetings and reschedulings and this and that. I just got asked today to make a couple of things that are going to take this week. So this week's out. Next week, I don't know. I've got appointments already, calls, so I don't know what's happening. Eventually, when I'm like 84, I'll be out in the field making a project again. And then we'll be on like the iPhone 2500. And I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Let me know. Do you like this look? This digital phony background? Or should I just go back to using the Sony, which I will probably will. The Sony sound's going to be better. I guarantee it. And this almost looks like a plasticky look, this film. I'm going to have to do some serious work on this to make this top-notch cinematic gold. Bye.